You ever notice how snow can make the world feel silent, almost peaceful, like it's tucking everything in for the night, hiding all the mess and noise under a soft white blanket? But that's just what it wants you to think. Because out there, on a lonely stretch of highway, snow isn't comforting. It's a trap. I learned that the hard way, and after you hear these stories, you'll never look at winter road trips the same way again. Picture this. You're driving home late, the world outside your windshield, nothing but swirling white. The heater's blasting, but your hands are still numb on the wheel. The road disappears beneath you, swallowed by the storm, and your headlights barely cut through the darkness. Every mile you feel more alone, more cut off from the world you thought you knew. And then, just when you think you can't get any more lost, something happens that changes everything. These aren't just stories, they're warnings. Real tragedies that happen to people just like you and me who thought they could beat the storm. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will haunt you every time the snow starts to fall. It was supposed to be a simple drive, just me and my girlfriend Emily heading home for the holidays. We'd done it a dozen times before. Route 17, a straight shot through the mountains, a few hours of winding roads and radio static before we DB back in the warmth of my parents' house. The smell of pine and cinnamon, the promise of a real meal. We left later than we should have, but we were young and stupid and in love, and the world felt safe, even with the weather warnings flashing on my phone. The first hour was easy. Emily dozed off, her head against the window, breath fogging the glass. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other fiddling with the radio, trying to find something other than the endless loop of Christmas songs. Outside, the snow started as a gentle dusting, flakes swirling in the headlights like confetti. I remember thinking how pretty it looked, how peaceful. I even took a picture at a rest stop, the car dusted in white, Emily grinning at me with her hat pulled low over her ears. But the further we got, the heavier the snow fell. The road narrowed, the trees pressed in, and the sky turned the color of dirty wool. I started to lose the lines on the pavement, the world shrinking to the tunnel of my headlights. Emily woke up, rubbing her eyes, and I tried to sound calm when I told her everything was fine. But my hands were sweating on the wheel, and my heart was beating too fast. We passed a sign for a town I'd never heard of, the letters half buried in snow. The radio fizzled out, replaced by the low, constant moan of the wind. Emily reached for my hand, her fingers cold. "Maybe we should pull over," she said, her voice small. I wanted to agree, but there was nowhere to stop. Just endless trees and the white blur of the storm. Then, out of nowhere, the snow turned violent. It was like driving into a wall. The wind howled, shaking the car, and the snow came down so thick I couldn't see the hood, let alone the road. I slowed to a crawl, my eyes straining for any sign of a shoulder, a driveway, a light in the distance. But there was nothing. Just us, the car, and the storm. Emily started to panic. She kept asking if we were lost, if we should turn back. I tried to reassure her, but my voice sounded fake, even to me. The GPS was useless, spinning in circles, the little blue dot floating in a sea of white. My phone had no signal. I felt the first real stab of fear then, sharp and cold as the wind outside. We drove for what felt like hours, the world outside, shrinking to the sound of our breathing and the wipers scraping across the glass. The snow piled up on the windshield faster than the defroster could melt it. I kept thinking I saw shapes in the darkness trees, maybe or something else, something moving just out of sight. Emily squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Then, suddenly, the car lurched. The tires spun and we slid sideways, the world tilting. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. We skidded off the road. The car shuddering to a stop in a drift so deep, I knew we weren't getting out without help. The engine sputtered, then died, leaving us in silence broken only by the wind screaming around us. Emily started to cry. Tried to hold her, but my own hands were shaking. I told her it was okay that someone would come, that we just had to wait. But deep down, I knew no one was coming. Not out here. Not tonight. We tried to call for help, but there was still no signal. I turned the key, hoping the engine would catch, but it just clicked over and over. The cold started to seep in, slow and relentless. We wrapped ourselves in blankets, huddled together, watching our breath hang in the air. The windows frosted over, turning the world outside into a blur of white and shadow. Time lost all meaning. Minutes stretched into hours. The wind never stopped. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps crunching in the snow, or voices calling our names, but when I looked, there was nothing. Emily whispered that she saw someone standing by the trees watching us. I told her it was just her imagination, but I was lying. I saw it too, a dark shape, tall and still, just beyond the reach of the headlights. At some point, I must have dozed off. When I woke up, Emily was gone. The passenger door was open, snow blowing in, her footprints leading away into the storm. I stumbled out after her, calling her name, my voice swallowed by the wind. The snow was up to my knees, the cold burning my skin. I followed her tracks as far as I could, but they just stopped, like she'd vanished into thin air. I searched until I couldn't feel my hands, until my voice was raw from shouting. But there was nothing. There's no sign of her, no sign of anyone. It's just the endless empty woods and the storm closing in. When the rescue team finally found me, I was half frozen, delirious, still calling her name. They searched for days, combing the woods, but they never found Emily. Not a trace, not a footprint. It was like she'd been swallowed by the snow, erased from the world.
Oh.
To this day, no one can explain what happened. The authorities said she must have gotten lost, disoriented by the storm. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. Sometimes, when the wind howls outside my window, I hear her voice calling to me from somewhere far away. And I wonder if she's still out there, lost in the snow, waiting for me to find her. After Emily vanished, I thought nothing could be worse than being alone in a storm, swallowed by the snow in silence. But sometimes, being surrounded by people doesn't make you any safer. In fact, it can make things even more terrifying, especially when panic spreads and trust starts to crack. If you think being stranded with just one person is bad, wait until you hear what happened to a bus full of strangers. It's trapped together on a frozen highway with nowhere to run and no one to call for help. Their nightmare proves that sometimes the real danger isn't just the storm outside. It's what happens when fear takes hold inside. Thanks for watching. I never liked traveling by bus, but that night, it seemed like the safest option. The roads were already slick with ice, and the forecast promised a blizzard by midnight. Still, the ticket was cheap, and I figured there was safety in numbers. I wasn't the only one who thought so. The bus was packed. Every seat filled with people clutching backpacks, duffel bags, and steaming cups of gas station coffee. The air was thick with the smell of wet wool and nervous anticipation. We pulled out of the station just after 10. The driver, a big guy with a graying beard and a voice like gravel, cracking jokes over the intercom. "Don't worry, folks," he said. "I've driven this route 100 times. We'll be home before you know it." People laughed, and for a while the mood was almost festive. Someone played music on their phone, and a group of college kids in the back started a game of cards. I settled into my seat, pressed my forehead to the cold glass, and watched the world blur by in streaks of white and yellow. But as we left the city behind, the snow started to fall harder. The highway narrowed, the lights grew fewer and farther between, and the bus grew quieter. The driver's jokes faded, replaced by the steady thump of the wipers and the low hum of the heater. I glanced around at the other passengers, an old woman knitting, a couple arguing in hushed voices, a man in a suit tapping nervously at his phone. We were all strangers, but for a while, It felt like we were in this together. Then somewhere past midnight, the storm hit in full force. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and the snow came down so thick it looked like we were driving through a tunnel of static. The bus slowed to a crawl, the headlights barely piercing the swirling white. People started to murmur, shifting in their seats, glancing at the driver. He kept his eyes on the road, jaw clenched, hands tight on the wheel. Suddenly there was a jolt, a sickening lurch as the bus slid sideways, tires spinning uselessly. The driver cursed under his breath, fighting the wheel, but it was no use. We skidded to a stop, the engine growling, then sputtering into silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then the lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. Panic set in fast. Someone started shouting, demanding to know what happened. The driver tried to calm everyone down, but his voice was shaky now, the confidence gone. "We're stuck," he admitted. "But we're not far from the next town. I'll call for help." He pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. A ripple of fear moved through the bus. The temperature dropped quickly. People wrapped themselves in coats and scarves, huddling together for warmth. The windows frosted over, and the only light came from the glow of a few cell phones. The old woman stopped knitting and started to pray under her breath. The couple in front of me argued louder, their voices sharp and desperate. Hours passed. The storm raged on, the wind screaming like something alive. The driver tried the radio, but all he got was static. Someone suggested we should try to walk to the nearest town, but the driver refused. "It's too dangerous," he said. "We stay together. Help will come." But as the night dragged on, hope faded. That's when the noises started. At first I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard it. Something scraping along the side of the bus, slow and deliberate. A few others heard it too. Heads turned, eyes wide. The driver shone his flashlight out the window, but all we could see was snow swirling in the beam. Then came the pounding, heavy rhythmic thuds against the back of the bus. People screamed. The driver rushed to the rear, but there was nothing there, just the door rattling in its frame. Someone swore they saw a shadow moving outside, tall and thin, gliding through the snow. The old woman started to sob, clutching her rosary. Inside, the fear turned ugly. People accused each other of playing tricks, nerves fraying with every passing minute. The man in the suit tried to take charge, barking orders, but no one listened. The college kids huddled together, whispering about things they'd heard, stories of people vanishing in storms, of things that hunted in the snow. The pounding came again, this time at the front. The driver locked the doors, his hands shaking. "Nobody goes outside," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "no matter what you hear." But the noises grew louder, closer, circling the bus. The windows fogged with our breath, and every face was pale with terror. Then, without warning, the back door burst open. A blast of icy wind filled the bus, and in the chaos, someone screamed a high, desperate sound that cut through the storm. People surged toward the front, trampling over seats and each other. I caught a glimpse of something in the doorway, a shape impossibly tall, with eyes that glowed in the darkness. Then the lights flickered back on, just for a second, and the shape was gone. After that, everything was a blur. People crying, shouting, trying to call for help. The driver managed to get the door closed, but a few passengers were missing. We searched the bus, called their names, but they were gone, vanished into the storm, leaving only footprints that disappeared a few feet from the door. When the sun finally rose, the storm had passed. The bus was half buried in snow, the windows frosted over. Rescue crews found us hours later, huddled together, numb with cold and fear. They never found the missing passengers. The official story was that they wandered off, disoriented by the storm. But those of us who were there know better. We saw what was out there, moving in the snow, waiting for us to let our guard down. Now, Every time I see a bus on a snowy highway, I wonder if the people inside know what's really waiting for them when the night gets cold and the wind starts to howl. And I hope they never have to find out. It's strange how being surrounded by people can make you feel even more alone when fear takes over. On that bus, panic spread like wildfire, and in the end, it didn't matter how many of us there were. No one could stop what was out there in the snow. But as terrifying as it was to be trapped with strangers, nothing compares to the horror faced by someone completely alone, miles from help, with only the storm and the darkness for company. If you thought the last two stories were chilling, wait until you hear what happened to a seasoned trucker on a remote mountain pass. Because sometimes, the most experienced travelers are the ones who vanish without a trace. I've been driving trucks for over 20 years, and I've seen just about everything the road can throw at you. I've hauled loads through tornadoes, dodged black bears in the Rockies, spent more nights than I can count sleeping in the cab while rain hammered the roof. But nothing ever rattled me like what happened that night on Black Ice Pass. It was supposed to be a routine run, just me, my rig, and a load of electronics headed upstate. I'd driven that route 100 times, and I knew every twist and turn, every lonely mile of highway. The dispatcher warned me about the weather, but I'd checked the radar myself. The storm was supposed to hit farther north, and I figured I'd be through the pass before it got bad. Besides, I liked the quiet of night runs. Less traffic, more time to think. The first few hours were easy. The hum of the engine, the steady rhythm of tires on asphalt, the CB radio crackling with the usual chatter from other drivers. I sipped my coffee, kept an eye on the temperature gauge, and watched the snow start to fall in the glow of my headlights. It was light at first, just a dusting on the shoulders. But by the time I hit the foothills, it was coming down harder, swirling in the beams like a million tiny ghosts. I wasn't worried. I'd driven through worse. I slowed down, flipped on the fog lights, and kept my hands steady on the wheel. The road climbed higher, winding through the trees, and the snow piled up on the hood. The radio started to fade, the voices turning to static, but I didn't mind. I liked the solitude. Out there, it was just me and the road. But as I started up Black Ice Pass, something changed. The wind picked up, howling through the gaps in the mountains. And the snow turned heavy, thick enough to swallow the world outside my windshield. The road disappeared beneath me, and the only thing I could see was the faint reflection of my own headlights bouncing off the drifts. I gripped the wheel tighter, feeling the tires slip and catch. Slip and catch. That's when the radio came back to life, but it wasn't the usual chatter. It was a voice I didn't recognize, whispering in a language I couldn't understand. The words were soft, almost musical, but there was something wrong about them, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I tried to change the channel, but the knob wouldn't budge. The voice kept going, rising and falling, until it was drowned out by a burst of static so loud I flinched. Told myself it was just the weather messing with the signal. I'd heard stranger things on the CB before. But then the headlights flickered, and for a split second, I thought I saw something move across the road. A shadow, tall and thin, gone before I could blink. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept driving, telling myself it was just a trick of the light. The snow got worse. The wipers struggled to keep up, and the defroster barely made a dent in the frost creeping across the glass. I started to feel the cold seeping in, even with the heater on full blast. The world outside was nothing but white and black, the trees looming like skeletons in the dark. Then the radio crackled again, and this time it was a voice I recognized, my own. It was like listening to a recording. Every word I'd spoken into the CB that night, played back in a flat, emotionless tone. This is Red Dog, eastbound on Black Ice Pass. Weather's getting rough, but I'm making good time. Over and over, the same words, looping endlessly. I stared at the radio, my hands shaking, and for the first time in years, I felt real fear. I tried to call dispatch, but all I got was static. I tried my cell, but there was no signal. The world outside felt like it was closing in. The snow pressing against the windows, the darkness swallowing the road behind me. I started to see things in the mirror, shapes moving in the storm, faces pressed against the glass, gone when I turned to look. I told myself I was just tired, that I needed to pull over and rest. But there was nowhere to stop, just endless miles of empty highway and the storm getting worse by the minute. The radio kept playing my voice over and over until suddenly it cut out, replaced by a high, keening wail that sounded almost human. That's when I saw the lights ahead, red and blue, flashing through the snow. Relief flooded me. I thought it was a police car, maybe a rescue crew. I slowed down, heart pounding, and pulled over behind the lights. But when I stepped out of the cab, the cold hit me like a fist, and the world was silent. The lights were there, but there was no car, no people, just the snow swirling around me and the wind screaming through the trees. I stumbled back into the cab, slamming the door, and tried to start the engine. It wouldn't turn over. Headlights flickered, then died, and I was left in darkness. The only sound my own ragged breathing. I grabbed the radio, desperate, and called out for help. "This is Red Dog, eastbound on Black Ice Pass. I need assistance. Can anyone hear me?" The only answer was my own voice, echoing back at me, distorted and hollow. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. When I woke up, the storm had passed. The sun was rising, turning the snow pink and gold. My truck was half buried in a drift, the windshield frosted over. I tried the engine, and this time it started. The radio was silent. I made it to the next town, hours late and shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. When I told the dispatcher what happened, he just stared at me. "We lost your signal for almost 6 hours," he said. "We tried to reach you, but all we got was static. Then, right before you called in, we heard your voice on the line saying you were fine. But you never said anything." They sent a crew back up the pass to check for the lights I'd seen, but there was nothing there. No tracks, no sign of another vehicle, just my own tire marks weaving through the snow. I still drive that route sometimes, but I never take it at night, not anymore. Sometimes, when the weather turns and the snow starts to fall, I hear that voice on the radio, my own words looping back at me, warning me to turn around. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd followed those lights into the storm, if I'd stepped out of the cab and kept walking. Maybe I'd be just another story, another name whispered by truckers who know that some roads are better left alone, especially when the snow starts to fall and the night gets cold. There's something about winter that strips away all the illusions of safety we build around ourselves. Out on those highways, it doesn't matter who you are, how prepared you think you might be, or how many times you've made the same drive. When the snow starts to fall and the world goes quiet, you realize just how small and fragile you really are. The stories you've just heard aren't just about blizzards or broken down cars. They're about what happens when nature decides to remind us who's really in control. Maybe you've felt it before, that creeping unease when the road disappears beneath a blanket of white. When the wind rattles your windows and the darkness presses in, maybe you've had your own close call, a night when you wondered if you'd make it home, or if you'd become just another story whispered by strangers. If you have, I want to hear about it. Share your own winter highway experiences in the comments, because the more we talk about these things, the more we realize we're not alone in our fears. But before you go, remember this. The next time you see snow in the forecast and you're tempted to brush it off, think about the couple who vanished without a trace, the bus full of strangers who faced something unspeakable, and the trucker whose own voice echoed back to him from the storm. Sometimes the real danger isn't what you can see, it's what's waiting for you just beyond the reach of your headlights. Stay safe out there and never underestimate the power of a winter night.